Well, team, thank you very much. I am happy to be back at VMUG. It's been over 2 years since I spoke at one, and most recently, I know we were talking about virtual events, and but I definitely miss the business lunches and interacting with peers, both in the community as well as like Drew at VMware. Today, we'll be talking about the VMware Event Broker Appliance and what it can do for you and how you can leverage it. I call it a new tool in your tool belt. To give you a little background on who we are, I did not do this alone. I want to give a nice shout out to Patrick Kramer, who was going to be my co-presenter, and unfortunately had a medical event this morning, so I'm sending him good vibes. He is extremely talented, very smart. Definitely check out his blog, patrickkramer.com. He's a vExpert. He's also an office of the CTO. And his day job is he's a staff cloud solutions architect for VMware Cloud and AWS. And fun fact, him and I joined VMware 2 weeks apart, spent our new hire training together, and we've definitely been close friends and peers since that time.
He's
Patrick is based in Chicago.
He's a great guy to talk to too. He's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. So Patrick is based out of Chicago, and then myself, I'm based in San Francisco. I joined VMware in 2014. I'm currently a staff platform architect. I've had just the pleasure of learning from a lot of customers since I joined VMware. I was very lucky to work with some of the fastest growing startups in the Bay Area. That caused me to learn new things, share it with my peers. So VMUG is a great opportunity to do that. Don't have a blog, but you can find me on Twitter retweeting something about Kubernetes or service mesh or something fun like Knative. For today, we're going to be talking about how Knative interacts with your daily life and how you can kind of leverage it in the VMware ecosystem, particularly as we're talking about cloud events, particularly fall into Drew's sessions on the hybrid cloud because it becomes very relevant. We'll also give you a primer on just what is Knative, what is serverless, this new buzzword bingo that we live in every day, the evolution of the VMware Event Broker Appliance, how did we get here, what's new today, and then what's coming tomorrow. So kind of quick hands, kind of watching, who is familiar with the VMware Event Broker Appliance, or VEBA, as I'll call it from here on out because it's easier. Feel free to raise a hand, I'm just curious. Okay, so for those who aren't familiar, VEBA is an open source project from VMware. It's also a VMware Fling. If you're familiar with Flings, feel free to chime in. But the idea is we want to take what is limited in vCenter, which is alarms, for example, and those can be used as an event to automate something. So instead of, we're moving more towards a declarative model instead of imperative of saying, hey, do this. Instead, we want to react, and we want to react in an automated way. And the example we'll kind of dive into today is we have a vCenter event, and we want something to happen after that. So for example, you might have a couple of machines in your environment. Let's say they're under PCI compliance, and you need to be hyper aware of changes like a power off event, for example. And when that happens, maybe you want to leverage a vCenter alarm and do something with it. But today, vCenter alarms are pretty limited. Think of in terms of there's over 2,000 Zipper events within vCenter that it just does out of the box, but there's only 200 alarms that you can actually do with that. And a lot of times that involves sending an email, maybe an S&T trap. But even as Drew was noting, there's different cloud providers that leverage the VMware stack, sometimes have limited availabilities in terms of like, can you even email outside? And then lastly, we were talking Power CLI earlier in the vcheck script. That's very close. I used to run the vcheck script every day in my environment just to see what was happening. In some cases, I had a newer VI admin that just didn't necessarily understand the full consequences of, let's say, snapshots. But these are things that you could leverage an existing script that you're already doing today. Now we can do that in an automated way. Nothing in chat, okay. So with that, we're going to kind of use a haiku. This is taken from the Knative in action book from VMware. It's free, it's online, I'll have a link. But in the very simple sense, I know a lot of this like Knative and serverless and functions, it's kind of buzzword bingo, but the goal here is to take an abstraction, remove some complexity like Kubernetes, and we want to take core logic and do something. And this is kind of going in line with the declarative model. So in this haiku, here is my source code, run it on the cloud for me. I do not care how. And that is kind of the primer for Knative and serverless. So Knative is a project from Google. VMware contributes towards it, and we're leveraging it in this project today. But essentially, it's a new pattern, or what I call a new tool. And the goal here is to simplify some of your daily lives by just taking the code, abstracting some of the complexities behind Kubernetes, for example, networking requirements, routing, other different things, and then just apply it. And so in the basis of serverless, and Knative can be called a serverless, you have a serving function, and then you have an eventing function. And the serving is essentially abstracting. So we want to kind of remove some complexities. This could be networking, this could be auto scaling. In some cases of software development, it could be revision tracking. But we're going to take our core business logic, and then we're going to apply it to the application. The eventing is on the reverse side. So we want to have some sort of connection, a communication across disparate systems. We're going to do that in a declarative way, and then we're going to use that as a subscription. So when this event happens, we're then going to tell it how we want it to react. And going back to our haiku earlier, I do not care how it happens. I just want the end state goal. So in your environments, you have all these different things going on. Back in my hedge funds days, it could be I was a Commvault user for compliance, but there's different things that I'm either interacting with the system already, or maybe the system's doing, DRS functions. We were talking HA and DRS settings being incorrectly applied earlier, but there's different interactions taking place in this system. But maybe you have higher events, events that are more significant to certain systems. And so we'll go back to our compliance example. Maybe there's a database, maybe there's an e-discovery hold, or there's some sort going on, and you need to be hyper aware to that particular system. Maybe it's a mission critical application. If it goes down, the business doesn't make money. So we could take an event like a VMware powered off from vCenter, and then we could leverage that in a new way. And so that's where functions come into play, and that's where Knative and serverless and the VMware Event Broker Appliance, or VEBA, is leveraging that under the covers. It's abstracted for you to kind of do new automation techniques with sometimes your existing scripts. So quick primer, vCenter has over 1,800 unique events, but a pain or a challenge is we can only do 200 actions off those. There's only 200 alarms. So VEBA is a way to extend those events in a new way. So we have an event source. We're going to leverage a VM powered off, and then it's going to handle as a platform and then kind of extend out. And this could be a combination of things. In some cases, you may already have, like we talked about earlier, your Power CLI scripts. Bash, for example, comes to play. Like nobody wants to either provide that vCenter API that we were talking about earlier to different people. Maybe they don't need it. Or in some cases, just interacting with vCenter via Bash may not be a great idea. So instead, we just want to invoke the API, let an abstraction system do the work for us, and then we want to extend that out. So some use cases that you can be thinking of is maybe I referenced like a snapshot earlier, a VM powered off or mission critical application, some sort of thing that's negative to your environment and you want to just kind of automate. And so the idea here is we're going to extend some of what vCenter does today. We're going to leverage some best in breed of the open source community, and we're going to give this in a packaged way. So you're not having to learn Kubernetes just to have automation events, or you're not having to learn serverless or Knative just to be able to extend a vCenter alarm and integrate with Slack, for example. And so for today's example, we're going to do a little bit of an automation. I'll call out some of how we got here first. But if you look at the greater community, where this evolved from, VEBA originally was open source in 2019. Was using a different serverless platform behind called OpenFaaS. At the time, the founder of OpenFaaS was a VMware employee, and the idea is we're going to use essentially a processor for events, and then what can we do with it? Work continued. We've both added integrations with like AWS Event Bridge. We've kind of decoupled some of the internal components, and we keep building in terms of integrations. So in December of last year, we added Helm chart support. started migrating to Knative, and then in the most recent release, version 6, we've now switched from OpenFast to now Knative as default. And that's really following in the greater community within the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, the Kubernetes, as well as VMware, where we see Knative going. VMware now has multiple people on staff who are contributing to the Knative project. And then we've started integrating more with day 1 and day 2, as we'll see in the next couple slides. So where we're at today, Knative is now default. We have tighter integration with vSphere, and this improves both the day 1 deployment as well as kind of the day 2 configurations. You'll see a reference to Sockeye here. It's another buzzword for you, but essentially it's a web-based event viewer, and we'll kind of show that in the demo. And then we've now added first-class support for PowerShell. I myself, growing up as a systems admin for 13 years, very comfortable with PowerShell, PowerCLI. It sounds like from the earlier sessions, I'm not alone. And what we've been building on that is giving sample functions, PowerCLI being one, easier get up and going. And then that's where we're kind of going next. And I'll kind of pause there. Any questions? So for today's example, we're going to give you an idea of what you can do within your vSphere environment and kind of extend something that's maybe already pressing for you, or maybe you already have a PowerCLI script. So today, to kind of create an alarm, you're going through the GUI, you're creating the rules, like what do I want to happen? And then you get a summary essentially at the end of like what's happened. And then you get the alert if and when your pager goes off. As we talked about earlier, some of the challenges is it's not very extensible. Like we're limited just to these 3 actions. And then in some hybrid cloud events, there's 4,200 cloud providers backed by the VMware stack, but you don't always have access, let's say, to send an email notification. That could be for security concerns, could just be pure access. And then even if you have full access, you're only limited to 200 different alarm events. So maybe you want to leverage the full breadth of the vSphere events and do it in an unrestricted way. So what we're getting with VEBA is we have the ability to take a vSphere event. We're going to use a function. You see this FX, if you see that, just stands for function. And we would then want to apply that core business logic in a sequence, and we want to leverage the eventing and serving function within VEBA, and then we want to do an action. And so in this case, we're going to define our business logic. Every time you see Sockeye, just think of web events. If you've ever done something in a Linux terminal, just doing a tail on logs, it's the same thing. And then for this example, we're going to take an event, we're going to derive something, and then we want to be unnotified. In this case, run a PowerShell script, and then we want to post to Slack. So powered off function, a power off event in vCenter is then going to tee up a function within VEBA and then update us in Slack. And this is where I'll pause and note that Patrick was originally going to do this demo. So I have a recording, and then I still have our Slack that we set up for you all. So I'll give you a quick primer, and then we'll kind of round out the slides and we'll kind of follow up. So in this video, this is a precursor to a Vmworld session on VEBA. We have some slides in the back with it. But before I click play, can everyone see this? Does this look okay?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, because I can adjust. So we have a vSphere environment. You have a VM called VMworld 2021. And then now we're in Sockeye. So this is the web events viewer. And what we're doing is we're looking for an event. In this case, it's going to be powered off. And we're going to leverage that as our basis for our action. So our logic is we want to protect this VM. If it gets powered off, we want something to happen. We want to be notified. So we see the log, in this case, VM powered off. And so we want to avoid this in the future. For those who are familiar with William Lamb, you know that he loves his print industries. So a couple things. he's looking at the back end. So this is just the vCenter components. The VM name is VMware 2021. And then the payload is this is where your script can go into play. So what do you want to happen? There's going to be some details in terms of like the logic that you want to be applied. What we're combining with VEBA is we're giving you all the containers you need to get going, PowerShells now integrated, so you could leverage some of your existing scripts that you already have. In this case, he's looking at what the function is going to do. In this case, give me the feedback of like what VM, when was it powered off, things like that. And then I think we're doing okay on time. In this case, we're looking at a little bit of the scripting. Okay, so now what do we want to happen? In this case, that becomes our logic. So we want to know what happened, when did it happen? We see the get date, we see what happened. So in this case, shutdown. And then how do we want it to be handled? And then we're looking at some of the backends. So in this case, we need obviously the vCenter credentials, secrets, and then in this case, we're going to fire an event to Slack. So we need to have the Slack details. So this could be the URL, this could be the secret to talk to it. And then I'll show you in our Slack what we actually set up for it to happen. Skip ahead here. So jumping ahead, we're actually going to kick off the event again. So this is the script that you may already be using. This could be a PowerShell script in this example. Right now, he's going to build the container that's going to run the logic. And this is what we're providing with the VEBA. So he's naming it Vmworld 2021. Okay, so it's built. And then now we're going to go back. All right. And so now he's doing a test. So we defined the function. So what the logic wants to do. We built the container that is now running on, and VEBA can deploy it in two ways that I should have mentioned earlier. So it can either be deployed in an OVA format, or it can just be deployed to run on Kubernetes natively. So everything's started. And then now he's got a side-by-side terminal, so we'll see what's going on. He's going to send the event. So now we're essentially getting the logs live. So you could either look at this in Sockeye, or you could just look in the straight in the CLI. So we see the resources, ability to define it. We see the connections to vCenter. We talked earlier about the date and time. So what is the value of that? What, when, and where? And all this is also available in the GUI. And then this is one of our end results. So we connected it to Slack. That's where you saw some of the secrets and the other bits. And what Patrick and I did for this is in the event of a power off, which was our example, is you can actually go and look and see when a VM is powered off. We want to be notified. We set up the payload to identify. In this case, TinyCore1 was the VM. We want to know where it was running, and then Home Lab is his data center. And then you see that it was powered off. And that's essentially the example that we showed here in William's Vmworld session. Any questions on that? The demo gods were not kind today, so I apologize, but definitely appreciate the patience.
No worries.
So this was a Slack example, but one thing I'll note is Slack is just one of many. In this case, we had an event that VM powered off, and we wanted to be notified, and that could be in Slack. But the nice thing with VEBA is we're extending it not just beyond email or Slack, but this could be, you could use a text service to get a notification of the event, or William actually used a really fun example of a pager. I haven't carried a pager in a really long time, but this is just, the possibilities are kind of endless in what you could do. The key is like, what do you want to happen, and how do you want to be notified? So in the event of something changes within your environment, you now have more possibilities to react. And the goal here is to take something that was maybe previously manual, maybe you ran a script, and then we want to abstract that away, leverage what you've already done via that PowerShell script, for example, or PowerCLI script, and have it do something in a reactive way without the manual intervention. So in terms of where VEBA is going, there's going to be a lot of improvements in terms of what's coming up next. It aligns very well with what our earlier session was around Horizon. So William Lamb has recorded that video. He has a new blog that came out yesterday talking about some of the improvements with Horizon. But the goal here is to make the day two capabilities a little bit easier to get started, tighter integrations with some of the VMware ecosystem. And the goal is to make it just more adaptable, give you a little bit more abilities to leverage your existing monitoring and tooling, including logging, extensibility, and then kind of leveraging some of the existing EUC components like Horizon as an additional event source. So when something happens, be able to react to it. For those who want to learn more, there's going to be several VMworld sessions, both at VMware Code as well as Vmworld proper. So for example, William Lamb, Michael Gash, two extremely bright individuals, they have two sessions, one being on the code side, one being on VMworld. Robert Gusky is going to have two sessions, as well as Patrick, my co-presenter, is going to have a session on the skills modernization for the VI admin. This is actually going to be a pretty interesting session where he's going to do a side-by-side walkthrough of, let's say, you've never set up Docker on your computer, or maybe you've never installed Python or some of the other components for just getting started with Visual Code Studio, for example. He's going to do that live with a peer, Michael Fisher, and it'll do a side-by-side of both a PC and a Mac OS, and you can just walk through from end to end, setting up anything you would need for just interacting with some of these new tools. And then lastly, PK here at the bottom is also blogged about VEBA. This is an edge services scenario. So improving trust and security at the edge, and this is a Horizon example. So pairs very well with the hybrid cloud and user computing and kind of adapting what can I do with some of the new tools in the ecosystem. For those who want to learn more, VMWEventBroker.io is the website for this project. You can also just go straight to the VMware GitHub or the VMware Fling site. So both of these are available, fling.vmware.com, as well as just vmware.github.io. Check the box because this is a Fling, but you can download it and get started. And definitely welcome contributions to the project. If you want to get involved, the VMware Code Slack is where you can chime in. Everyone here, in terms of the contributors, are under the VMware Event Broker Appliance channel. And with that, I'll pause. If you haven't already, please join or register for VMworld. Definitely be a great opportunity to learn more.